Right, we're moving on to another topic, and this is a really pretty disturbing story about an attacker, a thug who was spared jail for stabbing a complete stranger moments after a court was told of his genuine remorse for his actions. He was grinning ear to ear and taking selfies. This chap called Issac Francis, not a chap, this... I can't think of a polite word to say this. Awful thug, 22, ran up behind a man who was being set upon, and despite not knowing anyone involved, just got involved and knifed him twice in the buttock. And yet, despite having a previous conviction for robbery and possession of a bladed article, he walked free from court after a judge was told that the offence had been the wake-up call he needed. But minutes later, he was posing for triumphant selfies outside the courtroom. I mean, this is just horrific, isn't it? I'm joined now by Mike Neville, who's former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector. I mean, Mike, this sort of thing must really boil your blood when the police actually managed to get someone in a courtroom, which, you know, the backlogs and all the rest of it is pretty hard to do these days. And then the judge says, well, yeah, you've got a previous conviction for possession of a bladed article, you've got a previous conviction for robbery, but you knifing someone has actually, you know, given you your Damascene moment, and you're actually a good person, really. Go on, crack on with life. I mean, that must really annoy you.
Well, it's quite incredible, isn't it? And the public will be amazed that you can stab somebody again and again and get away with it. And as you say, this was a good investigation by the Greater Manchester Police, who got some images of him and identified and made an arrest. And the government were quite clear on this. In 2015, they set guidelines and law, in fact, that if you had committed 2 knife crimes, you would go to jail for a minimum of 6 months. That's the law. But unfortunately in the law, there's this bit of judge's discretion where it's like, well, you know, if he's not a bad chap really, and all this sort of nonsense. And I looked into the judge who sentenced this character, and she sits at Bolton Crown Court, where I'm originally from, bizarrely enough. But she gave a suspended sentence to a man who broke a baby's arm, GBH, and a suspended sentence to a man who drove 90 miles an hour in a 30-mile limit in Bolton, in a residential area. So it's quite incredible that judges can hand out these sentences. And the police, I will roundly criticise the police for not arresting enough robbers or burglars. Here they've done a good job, and the guy's out and about and free to go. It's incredible. I mean, your experience as a former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector, is this the sort of thing you've seen quite a lot take place, or by and large are these sort of cases few and far between where a judge is way too lenient? No, not at all. So last year, the Telegraph did a study and found that 40% of cases which involve somebody who should have received this mandatory at least 6-month sentence for a second knife crime did not go to jail. So it just shows how the sort of liberal blob, which most judges belong to, simply defy the legislation. You know, the government's been quite clear on this. 2 strikes and you're out. But here we have people who have 3, 4, 5 strikes and they're still wandering around the streets armed with knives. It's just disgusting. And do you think that this is actually sort of helping to embolden people who would commit offences to do it? And they think, well, look, you know, I know someone who's got away with this, that and the other, so there's no harm in having a go myself, whether it be assault or burglary or drug dealing or, you know, whatever crime it is they wish to commit. Well, we see this with the shoplifting craze, don't we? That people just think nothing's going to happen to me. I'm going to carry on doing it. Now, one of my jobs as a detective, I used to interview offenders and criminals to get information. And one of the things that was really made clear to me is that the only thing they fear is going to jail. All these community sentences and suspended sentences, they have no impact on these individuals at all. All they understand is being locked up. So we need more jails. If you're going to stab people, you'll just rush up to somebody you don't even know and stab them twice. It's just utter madness. This man should be in prison. There's no other place for them. No, I firmly agree with you. And what about the fact that we've got so many backlogs in our criminal justice system? Even when people have got their date in court, the date is likely to be 2 years hence. I mean, that means that a lot of ne'er-do-wells and wrong-uns and toe rags are just wandering about in society, having committed a crime for years before anything's actually done. You're right. And theft, with things like thefts and burglaries and robberies, 100 robberies is not committed by 100 robbers. It'll be five of them doing 20 each or something. These are prolific offenders who need to be jailed, and so they can't inflict misery on communities. And it's often the worst, poorest communities who suffer the most, who have to live with these people, who just inflict misery on everybody every day, and they need to be removed and know that society is sick and tired of their actions.
I mean, the police have come under fire a lot lately, constantly in the headlines. You know, the Met Police especially accused of all sorts of things, having to have a huge rejig. I think getting rid of about 60 officers a week at the moment. And we've been told repeatedly that only 90% of crimes actually result in anyone being charged. And the police seem to be really taking the rap for what people perceive to be an uptick in lawlessness in the country. Do you think that's fair, or is it because we've got overcrowded prisons, so even when someone does get a conviction and a custodial sentence, there's nowhere to put them? And then you've got judges like this who are essentially saying to people who are, well, as far as I can tell, hardened brutes, that somehow that underneath it all they're good people, and perhaps they've realised that, you know, the wrong of their ways. I mean, it can't just all be the police.
I agree, it isn't all the police. The police have a lot to be blamed for, particularly senior officers, because every day there are brave men and women on the streets who are tackling people who commit violent crime and helping victims. But the police have been very badly led, and as you say, it's up to 95% of crime goes unsolved. But like we've just been discussing, when they do a good job, and Greater Manchester Police are one of the better forces, when they do a good job, identify a nasty individual who's committed a serious, grievous bodily harm with a knife, goes to court and he gets off, and the officers would think, why do I bother? And, you know, too many of these young officers will see this chap again and think, you know, if I stop and search him, am I going to be accused of racism? Will it be me on one of these gross misconduct hearings the next time? And so it's a vicious circle where people think, why should I bother? And when you're in the police, you've really got to bother. I remember once at 6 o'clock on a Friday night at Brixton thinking, why am I bothering to try and organise this drugs raid when there's hardly anybody here? Because I care. And that was the moment when you think, this is not a job, this is a calling to do this, to make people safe. And the moment the police start to lose that, that's a really bad thing for the community. And officers will see this and put their head in their hands and think, I did a lot of work to bring that thug to justice, and this is what's dispensed, a suspended sentence which will count for nothing.